Oh, it
Welcome
even gives
to the
it.
balancing act. Yeah, it says the recording in progress.
Oh
So
wow, I get it's all fancy and shit. I gotta like accept it.
nice,
All right.
nice, awesome episode. I've got my good friend Britany from Randolph Macon. She graduated a year ahead of me.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Last night's podcast, I had my friend David from high school, and as I mentioned in that podcast, I really want to get back to my original purpose of why I started the podcast to begin with. I said it in more of a roundabout way last night, but since I've had a day and a night to kind of think about it, I think I can articulate myself a little better and just say that the target market when I originally started was people that I hadn't talked to in a while. I would consider it like my outer circle, not my inner circle, but people I hadn't talked to since high school, people I hadn't talked to since college. And my whole goal was just to catch up with those people, hear their stories, like hear how their life has changed, because mine certainly has like gone through at least like 10 360s
Oh yeah, for sure. For
through
sure.
multiple ringers, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's just good to catch up with friends. Like I was saying to Brittany right before we started recording, like I never anticipated having Allison McDowell or Ben Stewart or Brian Toohey on or Human Vibration. I'm super happy to have had them as guests on, and I'll definitely look to expand the podcast as well. But my original purpose was to hear stories from people that I haven't heard from in a while, and to kind of expand my circle more on a more grassroots organic level, people in Virginia, maybe people I meet in as you see, I have a Mayday hat. I'm part of the Wrecking Crew. I have
Oh
had
yeah.
a couple of Wrecking Crew members on here, but even that is, even with it being virtual, it's still more of like a community based thing rather than me like looking for some expert researcher. Again,
Or
I'm not
whenever you
gonna.
come out to Colorado to come visit, because I live here now.
Yeah, out in Denver, right, or Boulder.
I live about an hour north of Denver, so I live in Loveland, Fort Collins area.
Right. So yeah, let's just get right into your story. The last time, I mean, we hung out a lot in college. We partied quite a bit in college.
Yeah. Yeah,
You graduated 2010,
I
and
did.
we talked a little. We I think that it's natural with like high school and college relationships. Like, right after high school, you still talk to your high school friends while you're in college, but like the longer you're in college, the less you talk to them. And then by the time you
Yeah.
graduate from college, like you're hardly talking to your high school friends. And right after college, you're still kind of talking to your college friends for a few years, and then it kind of just you grow. I don't want to say grow apart, because I like to reconnect with people. That's part of the
I
reason for doing the podcast. But
I feel
you
like
get the
life
phenomena.
happens, right? Like so like people move, like my goal
Right.
was, I wanted to move as far away as possible. I wanted to start over. After college I moved to Miami. So you move from Virginia, which that was a huge culture shock. I went down to Miami, and you're hey, how are you? Strangers on the street, and they're like clutching their bags like you're trying to rob it. I'm like, oh, I was just trying to be nice. I forgot, like you can't do that in big cities. People look at you like you're insane or on drugs, or both. Probably both. So it's funny though that you bring that up. So I actually found a bunch of pictures from like right after I graduated. I think it was after you graduated too, but it was back when all of you guys lived together in that house.
Perry Street house. The Perry Street house.
Yeah. And I found a bunch of pictures of when I came back up to visit, and like it was a blast from the past. And I was like, wow, I haven't seen any of these people in quite a while. So it's good to catch up and see where everyone's at and how you've been and where everyone's going, I guess, because it'll change. Shit, a year from now it'll probably be different, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Things change quickly. So what did you got a psychology degree, if I recall correctly?
No, I got a philosophy degree.
Okay,
So
I knew you were in one of those two.
yeah, I started with psych. So I was determined I was going to get a psychology degree, and then I realized
That's right. You were attorney fan.
yeah, and they told me you have to be good at science to be a psychologist, and I was terrible at math and science. And then my first exam, I like totally bombed it, and I was like, how is this possible? Like, I know this is what I'm going to be doing. And then the guy, my professor, Professor McKay, actually, he passed away while we were in college still, but he was like, oh no, you're a philosophy major, you're way too opinionated. You know, and he told the other lady, the other professor,
Lambert.
he's like, yeah, he said,
Yeah.
I have a girl in my class and she's definitely going to be a philosophy major. And she's like, how will I know who she is? He said, oh, you'll know. You'll know. And sure enough, halfway through class, I'm like raising my hand. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I think this is stupid. And this is why I think it's stupid. Let me tell you what I think. And it was, I didn't know you could get a degree in being opinionated in what you think. And I just think it's so interesting though, because, you know, like you get these math and science majors that had to take an elective and they'd take philosophy because they heard it was easy. And they'd come to me for exams. They're like, how do I pass this exam? I'm like, well, what do you think? And they'd be like, well, what's the right answer? I'm like, well, there is no right answer. You just have to support what you think. It's not a right or a wrong answer. You just have to be able to think for yourself and have an opinion. So anyways, here I am, and graduated in the middle of the recession, and there's no way anyone's going to hire you with a philosophy and ethics degree in 2010. So I went on to go get a master's in hospitality management. Also, another thing I didn't know you could get a degree in is hospitality. Who knew that was a thing? You know, everyone else went to business school. I think you know, I feel like I took the easy degree route. I went hospitality because it was like how to be nice to people, how to make people want to buy stuff and spend money, you know, how to be on vacation. So obviously I'm simplifying that a little bit, but that's what I got my master's in. Then I just ended up going down a very crazy path where, you know, they said, hey, you need an internship. I was like, wait, what? An internship? And they're like, yeah, you need an internship to graduate. I said, well, I also need a job that's going to pay me money because you can't live for free in Miami. And that's how I started off. I started my career in a management training program for Burger King. And I was like, you mean to tell me I spent all this money for 6 years just to go back and work at Burger King? Like, that was not the original plan. I definitely put myself in a lot of debt with student loans, and you want me to go work at Burger King? And they're like, well, before you talk shit, why don't you look and see what they're paying? And I said, okay, I'll look. And I looked at what they were paying, and I was like, sign me up. I'll take it, because they were paying good money. So that's actually like how I started. And then I moved, you know, all over Florida, and I think I moved like 15 times in 7 years, Florida, Texas, and then finally settled down here in Colorado about 5 years ago. So.
And you said that there was an incident in there somewhere. I think it was in Louisiana. And it was kind of tied to what we wanted to talk about tonight, as far as like drug and alcohol addiction. What
Yeah,
was
I was
that
actually
story?
in Pensacola, Florida.
Pensacola, okay.
Pensacola. So yeah, I ended up you know, I think everyone at some point probably ends up encountering someone that they grow really close relationships to, and then ends up you for whatever reason you don't see all, you know, I call it, you know, they've got the memes now, red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, right? There's 1,000 red flags, but you know, especially when you're young and you're in your 20s, early 20s, you know, you're just so in love and blah blah blah, and you're stupid. Everyone's stupid in my opinion. I don't think you're super smart about relationships until at least, like, I don't know, we'll go with 25, because that's when I felt like I was less stupid. It's 25 or 30. We'll go with 30. I don't know.
I think it differs.
But yeah, no, I ended up losing my job, and I was, for whatever reason, me and the guy I was with thought it would be a great idea after we both lost our jobs to move in together, save money. Sounded like a really good plan. And then I remember, you know, I came home, bar, shopping, whatever. I didn't have a job, so I probably wasn't shopping for much, but you know, and I found, you know, I went to open the silverware drawer, and there's like meth drying out in the drawer, and I'm, hey, what is this? I didn't sign up for all of this, but then I was stuck because I don't have anywhere out, and I don't have a job, so I can't move. And there's nowhere else to go. So it was just, you know, addiction, I think, is one of those things that is really hard. You know, I think it grabs hold of people, great people that you know, addiction's one of the, you know, you hear it all the time. It's not one of those things that you can be rich, poor, any kind of color. You can be old, young. Yeah, it just happens to people, I think. And you know, I think I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, you know, it was like something like only 4% of people are able to recover from heroin addictions, and like the number is just so small. And you just watch these people that, you know, you knew really well, kind of like you watch them deteriorate or they die. You know, I don't know about you, but I think I stopped counting, but if I had to guess, almost 20, 30 people in the last 10, 15 years since high school, just to overdoses and addiction. So it's just really sad.
Yeah, and yeah, my number is not nearly that high. It's still in the single digits. But one aspect, I guess, that you could say of that entire topic of drug addiction, where does that 4% number come from? Because I'm just curious, because when you said that, I think about a country like Portugal, where the way that they treat drug addiction is so much different and their results have been so much more positive. I feel like our culture almost makes it harder for addicts to stop being addicts. The way, like, we
Oh
alienate
yeah.
them, we basically tell them that we're going to shut you off, we're going to cut you off from all of your connections, everything, your job, we're going to take everything away from you until you stop being an addict. And that, like, just makes them want to be an addict more, you know, like
Well,
what
and
else do I have at that point, you know?
and I think too, you know, like I'm trust me, I'm definitely not a let's put this out there. I'm definitely not a addiction specialist or anyone that's studied it by any means. But you know, if you look at, I don't know where the 4% comes from. It just popped up in a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a coworker of mine. So I'd have to dig into that number a little bit more for better clarification. But you know, I think, you know, you look at rehab, right? So you can't force an adult into a rehab program, into an inpatient rehab program. So, you know, like in that situation, you know, we took, you know, the person I was living with and drove him to the place and tried, and they said, you know, you can't, unless you can basically claim that they're it's like a psych hold, right, where they're a danger to themselves or others. Like, you can't make someone go to an inpatient rehab. So then your next best option, if someone truly wants to get better, you know, they can sign up for the in-house. But even if you sign up for in-house rehab, okay, what, you're gone for 30, 60 days in this perfect world where you know, are surrounded
I
by
was just about to say, like, I don't
all.
know that the whole rehab program, the way that the whole thing is set up, is not, it hasn't proven to be very effective.
Yeah, at least not in our country, right? So, and it's getting worse. You know, and you see a little bit. I mentioned to you before we started, you know, that show on Hulu, Dopesick. They actually kind of touch on that, where, you know, the guy, like this rich doctor, maybe not rich, but this doctor in this town gets addicted to the opioids with Oxycontin, right? Because, you know, everyone was lied to in the 90s and they pushed it, and it wasn't, Oxycontin wasn't as addictive as other opioids. That's why you should prescribe it. And, you know, we'll prescribe 80 milligrams for a back injury, something absolutely
It's
insane, right? And then you had pill farms. And if you
in
haven't seen it,
fact,
man,
no,
you've got to
actually,
watch it.
I haven't watched Dopesick, but one of my first exposures to the drug war, or whatever, this whole topic in general, was you know, I was a sports nerd growing up. This was before I even made it to Macon. I was like 16 or 17. I read an article in Sports Illustrated about a guy. He was drafted like 1998, 1999, number 2 pick in Major League Baseball, first round, second pick in a baseball draft, includes high school. It's like the most
Oh
competitive.
yeah, it's huge.
There's more rounds than NFL and NBA, and there's way more eligible players because there's like an international pool. It's crazy. So you're talking about like the number 2 amateur player in pretty much the world at that time. And yeah, like, no, they didn't know, but he had developed an Oxycontin addiction. And yeah, I mean, it was a Sports Illustrated, you know, it wasn't the cover story, but it was like one of the main stories in that issue. And it was insane. Like, this guy lost like a $3.5 million signing bonus. he pretty
Oh
much
yeah,
went from on top of the world to like
nothing.
janitor at Peabody High School in Massachusetts or whatever, wherever it was
Right.
up in the Northeast.
Well, and
And
it's
yeah,
it's just so. I mean, you watch it. You watch really really good people. So like I was saying, the doctor or whatever, like he starts his own rehab program for his community because he's like walking around and asking people, how many times have you been here? And the people in the rehab facility are like, this is my sixth time. This is my fourth time, my eighth time, right? And it's like, okay, so, and the
that's
guy's
telling
like,
you
well,
right there that the shit is not working. You know what I mean? Like
right.
we got
So
to
the guy, like
change
the
the
doctor,
way that we're
he's like,
treating them.
right, like he's a smart person, right? And so obviously it's not based on a true story, but you could literally apply it to probably any city in America, right, that has a problem. And so, the guy's like, well, I just don't feel like this is going to work, and I'm worried it's not going to work for me. Why would it work when it's not working for anyone else? And I think, it goes back to, you put people in a bubble, in a perfect world, and then you release them out of the bubble, and then like they can't get jobs. And if they get a job, it's not paying, it's paying minimum wage where, it's hard to pay your bills on minimum wage. And I'd be willing to say, I'm sure there's statistics on it somewhere, but most people who, fall into a lot of those addictions, a lot of them either have moved far away from their families. It's not that they don't have supportive families, but, they may have burned those bridges along the way, stolen enough things from their parents and, crash their parents, the same things, right? Like you just,
This
there's so many things
there's I was gonna say there's so many examples. It's so sad but so true. It's just like pretty much anybody listening to this, they know
everyone
exactly what
knows,
you're
right?
talking
So
about. Yeah.
and you watch the situations where these people have either burned their bridges or like I had a friend of mine, someone called me and was like, hey, so and so just died, and I'm like, oh shit, what happened? And they're like, oh yeah, it was, he left, we put him on a train, right? We sent him to rehab to live in a sober living with their family. They were there for 24 hours, bought another train ticket, went across the country to California, and then the next you hear about him is they died of this one's crazy, is he literally apparently died from an eyeball injury where something was so brutal that like ripped his eyeball out of his socket, and he died of this eye injury. But he was living in some, I don't know, mountainous town in the boonies in the middle of nowhere, and someone drove him and dropped him off in front of some storefront where the storefront called 911. And it's like, okay, well, clearly you're on drugs or you're doing some sort of drugs, because no one's just going to drop you off in front of a storefront if you're, a good law abiding citizen, that goes to work every day and you know what I mean? Like, you only get dropped off in front of a storefront if you've probably been living or doing something sketchy, and the people that you're with don't want to be
To be
seen with you.
associated with you. Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right. Or get caught, right?
Right.
Because they don't want to be attached to you. So it was like, no, he didn't die from a drug overdose, but if anyone who knew his story, knew he was probably on some sort of drugs where this injury happened as a result of being too fucked up, right?
Right.
And then, could he have been saved? Maybe, right? You don't know, because had they not just dropped him on a sidewalk in front of a storefront, could he have made it? What, you just don't know. There's just so many different, like, just sad stories of just people that, and they leave their kids behind, like so many, like I was telling you, I had a friend of mine just relapsed, and he's got 3 kids under the age of 6. It's just so sad. And I just I just think we need to figure out a way to change, I guess, the stigma around it, because it is a disease. And I think there's a lot of good people in the world that they don't want to necessarily be addicted, but like one of the things that the Oxycontin thing and Dopesick was talking about, and obviously I don't have this problem because I'm not addicted to Oxycontin or anything, but it was talking about how it changes the chemicals in your brain, and then when you're without it, it literally makes you feel like you're going to die if you don't have it. And I think that's terrifying. Like I can't imagine being in that situation to where I felt like I was going to die if I didn't do more drugs. I mean, I felt like I was going to die by doing drugs and maybe, being way too fucked up, right? But to feel like I'm going to die by not having drugs, it's just, I just feel like it's a very weird concept, and I think a lot of people don't understand it and can't comprehend, I guess how people process that. So it's easier to blame the addict, right? It's either to say, oh, they wanted to do that, it's their fault. And we just release them back into society and then we say, hey, good luck. I don't know how that's going to work. I feel like we need to figure out a way to try to figure out a different way to help, addiction in America, because it's not just America where it's a problem, but I feel like we have higher numbers than maybe some other, or maybe the luxury of not being a third world country, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a really it's an incredibly complex issue in my opinion, and it is something that I have looked into a lot because of some of my personal experiences. But I do feel like the brain chemistry angle is a little bit overplayed. I do think that biology does play a role, but I also think that the way our culture, just the way that we address it in general, is one of the bigger problems. Like, we don't ask people why they're distressed, what's been happening in their life. It's just that they always want to relate it to the chemicals. They don't ask them about their story. And basically, his argument is that the old story is that depression is a disease and antidepressants are a cure, and that depression is a malfunction of the brain. But what he's saying is that we've been systemically misinformed about what depression and anxiety really are, and that they're not really they're not imaginary, but they're not a weakness either, and it's not really due to a malfunctioning brain. He says that they're a consequence of our society's lifestyle, and he makes the argument. He gives like a bunch of points, but I do want to try to like sum it up as quickly as possible because I don't want to like read this shit. But basically what he's saying is stop asking what is wrong with people and start asking what happened to you.
Oh yeah.
And
well, you see that too, right? Whenever, like, a lot of people, you could look at it, alcoholism, you could look at it, coke, you could look at it, meth, heroin, there's a number of pain pills, Oxycontin. And most of the time it's typically people who it either, I think a lot of it, some of it does start in high school, or, you're experimenting and things, but then I think other times, like as an adult, I think you're more likely to revert back to some sort of something to try to escape your problems or pain, right? You're trying to escape pain. And it's not physical pain, it's mental pain, it's
psychological.
emotion,
Yes. So yes, this is the line I was looking for. He says, you are not a machine with broken parts. You are a human being with unmet psychological needs. That's hitting the nail on the head right there. That's what
I would agree with that, because I mean, I think if you look at it, a lot of times you see it as and I wouldn't say it's, everyone, but I'd say, a lot of the people, it's, something happens, they make a mistake, right? They get in trouble, their kids get taken away. So then they're in pain because they don't get to see their kids. And then that creates guilt. And, and I think too, counseling and things like that. We talked about this, but I'm a big firm believer in, counseling, and not necessarily like psychiatrists are great too. They'll pump you full of drugs. You say, hey, I'm depressed, they give you an antidepressant. And so there are some people who genuinely need that. And I'm not saying that there aren't, but I think there's a lot of people in the world that, we've groomed our society to think that, your back hurts, you should take a pill for that.
Well, in that, but another thing to go, I don't mean to interrupt you, but as far as the pharmaceutical, I think, and I agree with him on this point too. He says that and oftentimes that is a necessary short-term solution. The problem is there's never a plan. When you first get prescribed that pill, the doctor is not also giving you a plan of this is how long you're going to take it, this is the dosage, and this is when we're going to get off it. There's
Or,
no
hey, you need
plan
to
to
go to
get off it.
physical therapy for this long for pain pills, or you need to go to counseling for
Right.
mental distress, right? Or whatever it is. There's no structure, I
Right.
guess.
It's just the chemical. It's just,
It's just,
and
hey,
there is that is real. You know, I don't want to
mhm,
discount that completely. That is a real factor, but it's being overplayed in comparison to the social and psychological aspect of what happens in an addict's brain, basically.
well, I think it goes to instant gratification too, right? So we live in a
Well, that's
society.
bonding. I think the gratification thing is bonding. I think what drug, whether it's alcohol, even the ones that are like very considered mild or socially acceptable, like caffeine or alcohol or even cannabis at this point, I would say is relatively socially acceptable. But all of them, I feel like what that is it's that chemical, the chemical part of it, the chemical bond is basically what that is doing is replacing the bonds that we don't have anymore in society because we don't live in tribes anymore. And
Right.
we're the most individualistic culture to ever live in America specifically.
Yeah, no, I definitely could see that. I mean, I think, I think, and, I'm sure we'll get to this too. We talked about relationships, but I think, a lot of people, even if whether you're married or not, or whether you're domestic partnership or you've been together for 20 years, I do think that, most people in society, you're looking for acceptance, you're looking for community, you're looking for that bond with other
All of the
people.
things that we've lost since we exited tribes and tribal
Right,
lifestyle.
exactly. So you're looking for, likeness and acceptance and things, and you see it in children, you see it in teenagers, and we magically think that goes away when you become an adult and you become a slave to your job and you start working, 50, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and you want to get that paycheck. And then, I don't know if your parents ever told you this as a kid, but when I was a kid, it was, you get to drink when you turn 21 because
Shit, my parents had me drinking when I was 14, and the reason
well,
was they
well,
didn't want me
mine
out
was,
and about
well,
drinking.
yeah, mine was you earned it because you have to work all day and your life becomes miserable when you're an adult. Don't rush it, right? So like it was like this thing where like you get to earn, the physical substance escape from the world. You get to earn that when you become an adult, because life is shitty and miserable and whatever it is, right? It becomes all these other things happen in your life, and there's all these things that occur, and people, again, you're looking for acceptance and love and companionship and togetherness. And whether, I think no one has that there. I wouldn't say no one, but I would say there are very few career paths and companies that are really, preaching for togetherness. It's more of,
There's plenty that preach it. How many
oh, well,
practice
they
it?
preach it, right? Or it's like my favorite was my coworkers and I joked about this, like, oh, we're a family
Yeah.
business.
Oh my goodness, that's like a
Red flag,
famous
red
one.
flag, red flag, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're family, but there's so much toxic shit that goes on where there's
Yeah. What
favoritisms,
kind of family are we talking about here?
right? Like, I'm not your family, and it goes to show, like, I went and gave a notice, and they
The
had,
wild and wonderful whites of West Virginia, maybe.
yeah, like I had, like I give the example, like I worked for a company, I helped them build their business from, 2 stores to almost 60 in 3 years. And, I told them I was unhappy for about a year. And then I gave my notice after 60 days of giving them time to find someone new. They let me go within 48 hours. And it's like, oh, but we're a family business, right? But I'm gonna make sure you don't have that health insurance the next month. I'm gonna make sure you don't get that next paycheck like you thought you were, right? It's just like little things like that where, I think, we really look at society, and, I do think, we can talk about social media and things like that. We didn't talk about it before, but I think we've gone into this.
Well,
We're
social
looking.
media is a drug and an addiction, so I think that's a good
Oh yeah.
segue into
Well,
anything else that you want
I
to talk
agree.
about.
Well, because people, okay, great. You may not be drinking every night, but you're spending 7 hours on your phone. And can you actually go out to dinner and have a conversation with the people at your dinner table, or are you all on your phone looking at what everyone else is doing? And I even see it in, my mom, right? So my mom's 75, and my mom, I will go visit her, and she's gotten to the point where, my mom is addicted. My mom has an alcohol addiction. So, it just ties into all of it.
As does the majority of adults in America.
Right. And so it's one of those things where, but I go home to visit her, and she doesn't have anything to talk about. All she wants to talk about is, hey, did you see on Facebook? And she's on her phone. I'm literally sitting in the room with her, and she's so busy on her phone looking at Facebook, asking me, did I see this about my cousin? Or did I see this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm also on Facebook. I also can see their life events, like if you like, we can talk about that, but not, you're sitting in a room with another human being, and they're more focused, like they don't know how to be present in the relationship or in the, in person anymore. It's like,
I think you would really like this author, Johann Hari. He's a homosexual dude from the UK, but he is a hell of a writer, and he writes about these exact topics. His
okay.
first book is one that I have not read yet. And the reason I did not read that one is because I have already read a lot of books about the drug war. And I just felt like it would be overkill. But he is a really good writer, so I might end up reading it just because he's a really great writer, and it's a topic that I'm no longer a novice in at all, but I already have some knowledge in. But that one's not a priority right now. But the one I read that I was just kind of referencing is called Lost Connections. And the subtitle is like the real reasons why we're anxious and depressed, something like that. That's not exactly it, but it's
I feel like it's a good summary, and I kind of,
it is basically the reasons. Yeah, it's 9 reasons why. The 9 causes of depression and anxiety. And the way he lays it out, he's, like I said, he's just an amazing writer. And basically he makes the argument that although biology is a part of it, it's more so the way our culture and society addresses it. And depression and anxiety are actually a signal that something is wrong about the way that we're living, and it's more of a lifestyle issue versus an individual issue. But that's the one that I would most highly recommend, only because I've actually read that one. But the one that he just published is actually called Stolen Focus, and it's about exactly what we were just talking about. People, their focus has been stolen by smartphones, digital devices, tablets, social media,
games,
anything, literally.
Candy Crush.
Yeah, distraction is like the thing now, like It's not even distraction anymore. It's like real
it's
life
all consuming.
Distraction from that, from all distractions.
Right.
Crazy.
Well, and it's funny that you bring that up. So, I've probably spent, and I'm sure a lot of people are in a similar boat, but I've probably spent the last, it's probably been the last 6 or 7 years where I call it, a wellness journey, right? So like 6 or 7 years ago, I had, a terrible diet. I was living on fast food because I lived in my car. So I was in my car 6 hours a day. I sucked at cooking, so I didn't really cook a whole lot, and so I just lived on fast food. And I went to the doctor, and they were like, hey, if you don't change your eating, you're going to end up as a diabetic. And there's a lot of diabetics in America, but the amount of money that you have to spend on those on the diabetic drugs,
the EpiPens and shit. Yeah,
it's an insane amount of money. And so I said, well, I can do one of 2 things. I can either continue down the path and to spend more money on drugs to help me from my lifestyle, or I can change my lifestyle and, try to be a healthier individual. And that was probably it was probably right after I met my husband. So about 6 years ago, when I started, trying to like eat healthier and exercising more regularly. And, and I don't know, I look at, like my sister, I think's done a great job with my niece. They have very healthy lifestyles. They go to the gym. Like she taught her, I feel like, how to cope with stress in their sports, and they work out and they eat healthy, and, all the things that I don't feel like so I'll say this. So I think it's a product of your generation, right? So like my mom was born in the 40s, 50s, and was raised during when the microwave came about, right? And so like when I was growing up, I was raised on microwave TV dinners and, dinner in a box, right? Rice-A-Roni, hamburger
Stofers.
helper, right? Everything that's super processed. And I'm not saying that there was anything necessarily wrong with that, but I think when it becomes more of a norm, then,
The quick
hey,
meal.
it's a Friday. We're gonna, do something, out of the
Quick.
box today, right? So I just feel like, I worked really hard over the last 6 years to try to change my eating habits where it was like, you actually cook and eat vegetables. So what a concept, right? And I think, you know those things in the back of your brain, you learn about the food pyramid or whatever. You grow up and you just don't think
I
about
mean,
it.
how much bullshit is that too, though? That's
Oh
just
yeah, well, you got to think about it. So it's all funded. It's all funded by,
yeah,
the like someone's
the
someone's
farmers of
agreeing someone
America.
else in corporate America, right?
Yeah, exactly. The USDA.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So you have all that, right? But I
They wanted
think
us
it's
eating like 8 servings of carbohydrates a day. Like
oh yeah,
now that's like hilarious that like they don't talk about it because they know it's an embarrassment, but like nutritionists laugh at the food pyramid now.
oh yeah, no, it's well, and it's funny too. And so there was something I watched on TV yesterday. They were talking about BMI. And they're like, yeah, BMI is just a unit of measure for insurance companies to basically charge you more money if you're over this like bracket, right?
Mhm.
Um, for their metrics. So like you're higher risk of all these other things, but if you're using, because so for example, like you can be a heavier set person and have better blood work and better, all the things that go into your actual body chemistry. You could be healthier than the person standing next to you that's super skinny who eats a bag of Cheerios and or they eat Cheetos and a Pepsi for dinner, right? But their metabolism just functions differently. So I could talk about that too. But anyways, that's not what we were gonna go down. But I just think it just goes into I forgot I lost track of what I was saying.
It's
So
distraction. It was distractions that we were talking
yeah,
about, and then we got
yeah,
distracted.
I see exactly.
It's just
So
how we're
it just goes.
programmed.
Oh yeah, we were talking about the phone and the food and everything. So
Our lifestyle in general is so distracted, and it's all about convenience too. Everything is
it
set up to
is.
be convenience.
Well, I think that. So it's funny we talk about convenience not being bad, and then I work in retail, right? So I literally work in the industry that's supposed to provide
I don't think
convenience.
it's inherently bad, but I think that especially when kids are raised, like it's one thing. I sound like an old person at this point, but it's like
We're old, okay?
we are old at this point, but technology has sped up at a speeding up rate, at an
Yep.
accelerating rate. And obviously we were spoiled compared to our parents' generation. Our parents' generation was spoiled compared to their generation, but I do see a proliferation of like it's reached a crescendo because they can't escape the peer, like when, without social media, you could have a bully, but you go home. Now, like
Right.
they can't go home. Like these kids,
No.
they're never home. They're
Yeah.
never
So
at home.
it's
Like
funny that you
the
bring that up.
virtual
So
world makes you connected to all of those peers, and like it's just a different and especially for a kid whose psychology is already more moldable or flexible or whatever you want to call that. Like that's just it's just I think we're living in exponential times, it's especially like when it comes to child psychology. I think that like child psychology is really
I couldn't
important right now.
imagine. I know you're doing it, but I can't imagine raising a kid in today's society. I look at, all my friends have kids and, like my girlfriend the other day, I was over at her house and she's like, yeah, look at this. My kid's being accused of being a bully. And I said, oh, okay. Like, well, what happened? What is it? And it
A
was,
Facebook
uh,
post or something.
no, it was the girl messaged this other girl that she didn't like her copying her outfits. And the mom went off the deep end and was like, your kid's a bully and she needs, how dare she like be mean or whatever. And it's like, okay, like, I get it. Like that's like maybe she could have said it a different way or, maybe
Yeah.
she could have not said it at all, but like if she doesn't
And
like
what kind of example is that parent setting for her kid
for
on
that kid,
one of the
right?
things that I had written down, conflict resolution.
Right, exactly.
There's none of that,
And it was so
especially
over
when
the
the
top. And
parents
so the
are
mom, like my friend, and
exactly.
she was like, well, yeah, I think she maybe could have worded it differently, but she apologized. And now not only is the girl, but her sister is now messaging my kid, threatening my kid. And who's the bully? Is it my kid or is it your two kids that are now? And then it was like, oh, I'm going to the principal and I'm going to make sure they know that your kid's a bully and I'm going to get you kicked out of school. And I'm just like, I don't know how y'all contain yourselves around these other crazy parents, because I feel like if I had a kid and I was in these situations, I feel like my 16, 17-year-old inner self will come out
Crazy Britany.
And be like, I'm a bitch slap you. Okay, sit down and shut up. You don't who are you, right? Like, who are you? Like, I just, I just have such a hard time looking at, from an outsider looking in on a lot of situations. I'm like, I don't know how people do it. Like, I don't know how y'all bite your lips and keep your mouth shut and yes and no and but then at the same time, you look at talking about child psychology. Can we talk about shootings in America? I mean, I feel like that's terrifying.
I mean, that's kind of proof that what I'm talking about is important, because that's the proof
Did
right
you
there.
have an active shooter drill when you were in school?
No.
I didn't.
Mm-mm.
I sure as shit didn't.
Nah.
And then I hear about them, like you
Columbine.
see
Columbine was really like the first.
Columbine was the first.
I'm sure it happened before. I'm sure that there were one-off instances before Columbine, but Columbine seemed to start a trend,
Well, and I think too, so the other thing, and it goes back to social media and the internet, right? So the internet
got popular. It got popular.
It does a great thing, but then suddenly you start seeing it and seeing it and seeing it, and then all these other people are like, "Oh,
I know Adam Lanza's name. That made him famous.
Right.
Now these kids are like, oh, I could be famous if I go up shooting my school up.
You see all these crazy things, right? And so I just think there's something that we, as what we've done as a culture, as a society, as a country, as a world, right? It's not just the United States, it's the rest of the world. We've what was it? The technology revolution occurred, and then we've just continuously sped through. I feel like the rest of the decades ever since then. We've just continued to improve on things at a faster rate than I think
things are improving and people are getting worse.
Correct. And you can get a robot. Soon robots are going to, and I know this happened in the technology revolution, back in the day, and robots replace people in certain jobs, but sooner or later you're going to have robots replacing people, in minimum wage jobs, fast food places. There's already a
truckers. That's
truckers.
And Andrew Yang pretty much ran his whole presidential campaign. I mean, not that he was super successful, but he carved out a little niche following, and I followed him for a while. I ended up disagreeing pretty strongly with some of his views, but at the same time, he was making some good points, and that was one of them, that this is coming, whether
whether you like it or it's
whether you like it or not. I mean, his thing is it's coming. We need to figure out a way to make it work for everybody rather than just the few at the top.
Well, it's you look at Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster, I think, and this was 5 weeks ago, I was sitting in a class and they were going through something. They said, Blockbuster, they said, hey, what about this Redbox movie service? And Blockbuster was like, no, that's never gonna, that's a niche market. That's a niche market. We're never gonna do that, and they didn't adapt. And Kodak didn't adapt to digital
photography,
digital pictures. And then now you look at these two companies. Kodak's still around, and they're very small. They're a very small player in the big picture world, I guess, nowadays. But Blockbuster has one store left that's being rented out as an Airbnb. I think it's in Washington or Oregon, but Washington, I think. And it's just for nostalgia. There's one Blockbuster left out of all the Blockbusters, and it's because they didn't adapt. And if you don't look at where technology is going, you're never going to get to you're not going to make it beneficial for society unless you accept what's coming and not just say, no, I'm happy with the way it is, right?
Yeah,
And
resisting it. Yeah.
and I feel like even I do it today, right? Like some new phone comes out, some new program, some new way of doing things. And I'm like, really? Like, I got to learn this thing too. Like, I got to learn how to use this new platform or whatever. But if you don't, right, you look at it with even the pandemic, right? Zoom meetings and Zoom calls weren't a huge thing. And
It
now I
became
think
huge.
everyone, I'd probably say 75% of the country knows how to use them now, right?
Right.
So it's just, I don't know. Like, I just think we, as a society, we need to figure out how to build better personal relationships with people. And I think you solve a lot of the problems that we have, like all across the board.
Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly the same as what you just said, but it reminded me of something that somebody that I listened to talks about when he was referring to like governance and like the communism versus socialism versus capitalism versus whatever ism debate. He's like, I don't, honestly, like he's like any of them could work if people were better people,
Yeah, you got to fix the people.
any of these systems could work if people were better people. That's like nobody's focusing on being a better person. Like they're trying to improve the system or improve the technology or improve the road system. Like it's anything outside of ourselves. Like we don't ever say, oh, maybe we're the thing that needs to improve.
Well, so it's funny that you bring that up, and it ties back into the relationships piece. So I have no shame in saying that, my husband and I, so before, we're not super religious. And so before we got married, I said, hey, I want us to go to couples counseling because I feel like no one knows how to be in a relationship, right? I mean, I don't think any of us have. I'm sure there are people in the world that are like, yeah, my parents were great and they taught me everything and blah, 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 whatever. But I would say
it's
a majority
rarer
of people,
and rarer.
right, but I would say a lot of people, like either their parents are divorced or their parents were never married or they didn't live together or some, as a parent died. You have all these things. And one of the things that really resonated for me and my husband was you take your car in for regular routine maintenance. You do actually regular routine maintenance on any piece of technology that you have, software updates, oil changes, tire rotations. You do a lot of work on all the things you have. You spend money on something, you buy something, you want it to last as long as possible. You want to get the most out of that, whatever you bought, right? Clothes, you wash it, maybe you follow the directions on the tag or whatever. If you really like a piece of clothing as a girl, you want to keep it longer so it doesn't shrink and not fit you anymore, right? Anyways, but in relationships, when do we ever really take the time in our personal relationships to put that routine maintenance into effect, right? So are you doing, check-in
a software
or
upgrade?
Yeah, are you doing a software upgrade or are you just trying to upgrade to a newer model? Because the old model, it isn't working as well as it did before, right? So you see that analogy all the time, right? Like, oh, a couple gets divorced and man or woman ends up, with the person 30 years younger, right? And I just think it goes back to, I don't think anyone ever gets taught how to be in a relationship. How do you treat, how do you live with another human being and not only care about yourself? Because I mean, inherently, even if you have 7 brothers and sisters, everyone's raised to be relatively selfish. And so when you go into a relationship, it's all about you. You want to make sure that you're right and your needs are met. And me. And then the other person's like, well, wait, what about me, right? And then you never have that, I guess, mutual understanding, I guess, is where I feel like the communication breakdown. And then communication too. I mean, communication, you ask anyone, I'll tell you, I went around on my bachelorette weekend, and obviously I was very intoxicated on this weekend, a trip of mine with all my girlfriends, but I mean, I went and I asked every single person that I met that was married. I said, one piece of advice, if you were, if you could tell yourself 30 years ago, what would it be? Communicate, communicate. I got communicate probably 1,000 times. That's like, okay, great. That's a great piece of advice. But how the fuck do I do that? Like, is it, you know what I mean? Like, no one tells you, how to work on communication and, how to, or listen. Like,
Yeah, I was just about this. That was the word that was coming to my mind is like, yeah, everybody knows how to express themselves or talk about what they want, but not everybody knows how to actually
active listening.
active listening. But the word I was looking for was like, the word empathize is not the exact word I'm looking for, but it's like the word. I can't think of a singular word, but I guess the idea is like to actually listen with the intent of putting yourself in their shoes,
Yeah. Or trying to understand where the other person's coming from. And while putting, because I think what happens, people get very good at saying, well, what about me? This is what I want. This is what I'm not getting. And then the other person starts talking and you're like, you're too busy focused on all the things that you're trying to get out of the conversation that you're not able to set that aside and then actually hear, where the other person's coming from. And I wouldn't say I try every day. I wouldn't say I'm great at it, but
well, we're not taught. We're not programmed to. We're not taught how to listen. We're not. We're not programmed to be listeners. We're programmed to be fucking.
We're taught to sit down, be quiet, don't talk during class, don't, you know what I mean? Like that's what you get taught. And then even at home, it's a lot of times it's, don't interrupt, don't do this, don't, you know what I mean? Like there's just like, I think a lot of things that we learn as children, just from society and school, or, you come home and
the Toltecs call it domestication.
Right.
That's pretty much what it is. Domestication.
Don't play too loud. You'll upset so and so
the neighbors.
Yeah. Or whatever. The neighbors, or like even today, right? So I live in a neighborhood that has a Facebook community group page.
Whew.
The worst invention of all time. Okay. It is literally a diary for people to go online and bitch about their neighbors to all the other neighbors. And I'm like, can't you go sit on your back porch and drink beer with your friends and bitch about your neighbors like a normal human being? No, we don't do that anymore.
That's not normal anymore. Facebook bitching isn't the norm.
Yeah, Facebook bitching is normal. And then it's like, okay, great. So you want to bitch about your neighbors on Facebook, or you want to.
Isn't that like, didn't they have like a whole app for that? I kept getting these emails for a while.
It's called Nextdoor.
There's Nextdoor.
But now there's like now like you post on Nextdoor like a link for the community page and then vice versa, and so you get to bitch on two different platforms.
Oh, like they're linked together. Like Facebook's linked with every fucking thing.
So would you like to bitch some more? Like no, like just stop. If you have a problem, go talk to them like a normal person, or go hang out with your friends and talk shit about them on your porch. I don't know. Like that's what people used to do before the internet existed. Like I don't understand. And it goes back to communication, relationships, right? Like we don't get taught that. And I think that communication actually got worse with the social media and technology. I think it's better, but it's worse, right? So like there's a lot of pros to it. You can, like me and you, we couldn't have a conversation living in other states, 15, 20 years ago, that I could see you, I could call you on the phone, as long as my minutes weren't expired, right? As long as I had paid for enough minutes and it was after 9 p.m. or whatever. I'm sure you remember those days, back in the day. But
I had a flip phone when I was in college with you. My first smartphone was after I graduated college.
So I've still put minutes on a phone. I paid for minutes probably until I met my husband, and my husband was like, can you please get like a decent phone and get on a decent phone plan? And I was like, why? My mom, so when I was in high school, when I was 8th grade, 9th grade or whatever, cell phones came out, right? And my mom, I'm pretty sure, only got me the phone so she could use it to take it away if I didn't do well in school. And so
that's not bad. That's pretty smart though.
Well, it was pretty smart. The problem was she raised a really smart kid. So my thought process was, cool, if you're going to use it to take it away, I'm just going to go get my own and I'm going to pay for it myself. And then you can't take it away because then it's mine and I paid for it. And so that's what I did. I mean, I've literally been paying for my own phone up until I met my husband, and for, I don't know, 20 years, almost 15, 20 years until I met him. And he was like, can you please get a phone plan that it doesn't die off when you like go between towns or what? Because you had to buy minutes, and it was like Virgin Mobile. It was before Virgin Mobile. That's what I used. So Virgin Mobile now has like a cruise line, but I don't think they do prepaid cell phones anymore. But anyways, I kind of again got distracted. But
No worries. While you were doing that, I was trying, like, it was kind of bugging me. I was trying to find the word that I was looking for, and it actually is empathize. Like, there's no other word for that ability to just, when you're listening, to listen with genuine empathy and listen to understand and comprehend what they're saying, not to respond,
mhm. Well, I think it's really hard because you get so, and it's so funny because I'm one of those people where I try to take notes because I can't remember. I suffer from CRS. I can't remember shit. So, if I'm in the middle of a conversation and someone's talking to me about all these things that are bothering them and that are wrong, like I want to pull out my phone and I want to type it in, but then it looks like you're not paying attention. So then I want to get a piece of paper and a pen to write it down so I can circle back to it so I don't forget it. Because I know that I have terrible short-term memory. Like it's terrible short-term memory. And I just think it's one of those things where, I'm guilty of it too. If someone's talking to me, like I'm like, oh, I thought of this, right? Like, oh, I want to respond with this. And then the minute you think of that one thing, you stopped listening. Like they could
or
talk
at
for
least,
another
even if
5
you're
minutes.
still trying to listen, it's like distracting. Like, at that point, it's
Right.
split attention.
Right. And so and I know people think it's rude, but like I jot down notes. Like I'm over here like vigorously like writing or typing on my phone or whatever it is. I do it at work. I do it at home. Sure, it bothers the crap out of my husband because he's like, he'll be like, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, let me pull up this notepad from 4 months ago when you said this on this
Mm,
day. And he's like, are you kidding me right now?
mm.
And I'm like, well, but you said that I do blah blah blah, and I've been working on this. And he looks at me, he's like, what is your problem? Like, who does that? Like, you're insane. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but like I know that I won't remember it, so I have to go back and like try to like read it because I know I'm not going to remember it. And like there are people in the world that can remember things really well. Like short-term memory is amazing. I have the memory of a goldfish. I'm not, tomorrow I'd be like, what do we talk about? Like today I was like, oh, what did B&G talk about? What were we going to talk about on this podcast? I'm like, shit. I'm like, I feel like I got like 2 or 3 topics up there, like broad spectrum. And thank goodness you took notes, because otherwise I was like, we're just going to wing it because I did not take notes. But I think it's just funny though, because I don't think anyone can be expected to remember everything, right? And then if you're not like trying to actively listen and at least try to like pay attention or whatever to whoever's saying what, friendships, relationships, parents, whatever, right? Like, hey, I feel like blah blah blah, right? But if you're not doing that, I just feel like we end up in a society where it's like everyone just feels dismissed and alone. And then I think it leads back to that addiction, um, people trying to reach out for other things to make themselves feel better. And it's like this, it's like a catch-22, right? It's like a vicious cycle. We do this because we feel this way, but we feel this way because we haven't figured out how to, communicate or listen or, be in, healthy relationships with other human beings, right?
Yeah, I I personally, we're not going to go too deep into this, but I personally think that all stems from abandoning a tribal
Tribes.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so one thing you said earlier that I wanted to circle back to was you said you guys weren't super religious, and that was part of the reason why you went to marriage counseling or whatever, couples counseling. But the religious part I wanted to circle back to because that's one of the things I talk about on here is like what your, not necessarily religion, but what your beliefs are.
Mhm.
You know, I don't necessarily like the word God, but I think it's a good word to just kind of be a jumping off point as far as a good discussion. Like, what, as a philosophy major, what do you think about God? How do you picture God? Um, what is
So
your
it's
God?
actually
Who is your God, etc.?
so it's actually really interesting. So being that I took a lot of ethics courses and you know cultural courses, the word God actually stems from ancient civilizations, which means the sun. So if you really want to get into what does God mean to me, I mean, when I think of the word God, and there's two things, right? I think of like that it's hard for me because I went way on the other end for a while where I was like, I still think you could call me agnostic today because I do believe there is a spiritual. mm, so it's hard. Like I'm torn, right? So there's part of me that believes, there might be a higher, there could be a higher being at play or a higher spiritual, whatever, chemical hole in the atmosphere, I guess. But I don't really actually believe. I I think that people say everything happens for a reason to make themselves feel better. But I do actually think that things do happen to people for certain reasons, if that makes sense, which it doesn't. It's like an oxymoron. Like, so when you talk about religion and God, I think it's important for a lot of people to go to God and have religion because for children, I think it's important. I think it's a good way to teach children morality and ethics and don't lie, don't steal, don't covet thy neighbor, whatever.
But see, that's the catch 22 right there. Because if you're telling
Right.
them not to lie, but you don't really believe in God,
Well, right. And
but you're
so
using
so it's
God as
it's
your moral standard, like that's kind of
correct. And so
deceptive.
like I don't, but you see it too, right? You see a lot of religious people that'll do really terrible things. It's like
No,
in the Catholic Church, right? And I'm not hating on anyone, but you can
no,
go
I
sin
am. Fuck the
and,
Catholic Church.
and do a shit ton of terrible fucked up shit and then just go ask for forgiveness and it's all okay. Like
Yeah, no, I mean, I've got a
you're
lot of a
supposed to
lot of
listen.
a lot of Christianity I have a soft spot for, and I'm not
Yeah, but
anti-Christian,
then
but
hold on,
fuck
here's what's
the
interesting.
Catholic Church.
Okay, but
That's
so you
there's a difference between the Catholic Church and Christianity as a whole.
okay, but okay, so you remember Zeitgeist, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Zeitgeist, in my opinion, and I've listened to one of your podcasts. You mentioned a couple other newer, really good, I guess, documentaries that I wanted to watch, and I meant to write them down, and I didn't. So if you
Kymatica
remember,
is the main one.
yeah, so text them to me, because I won't remember. Like I said, you could tell me, I won't remember. I don't have a pen, and you're on my little phone thing here, so I can't type it on my phone. But so when I showed this movie, I showed Zeitgeist to a very religious person in college. We were still in college. And I sat him down and I was like, you got to watch it. Because they were like, Brittany, I can't believe you're not super religious. And they were very Christian. And I said, no, you got to watch it, man. Just watch it. And I watched this person I watched them have like a mental breakdown during this movie because they couldn't believe the similarities that were pulled for
Yeah.
Christianity from.
But see, it's that same shit that kind of get that allows me to have a soft spot for Christianity, because I think,
But it goes back to the sun. Like people worship the
no,
sun
I
because
agree. I agree.
it
It's
glows,
a
it
tradition.
tells.
It's one of many solar traditions.
I just like I feel like people often will go for like when trauma happens, right? So when trauma happens, I feel like there's my hopefully no one that ever works with me will ever watch this, but trauma, right? So like there's one of two ways in my opinion to deal with trauma. Like you can either, a lot of people either go to religion or drugs, and then they spiral out of control, or hallucinogenics, right? So you can either go, I feel like, one of three ways to deal with trauma. And I feel like I personally have a favorite on that one, but you already know what that favorite is. We had a great time in college, but I think that people often seek religion for understanding and acceptance and forgiveness. Again, it goes back to that tribal thing that you talk about, right? Like it's acceptance, understanding, and that community. And I think, and a lot of people I think use religion and going to church for that very reason. And
Mhm.
I'll actually tell you a story. So when I was in middle school, I think it was in middle school, there was a church down the road from my house, and my mom was raised Catholic. And my mom did not agree with the Catholic Church, and she grew out of her Catholic upbringing. And when I think I was 12 or 13, and all my friends went to church, and I wanted to go to church, and I wanted to be in the church plays or whatever. And my mom said, okay, if you want to go to church, you can walk. It was like a 7-minute walk from the house, so it wasn't super far. We lived in a really small town. It was really safe. Parents today would be like, that's child abuse, but it wasn't. Let me just be very clear about that. It was not child abuse. It was literally a stone's throw away. And so I would walk to church, and I went to church of my choosing because I wanted to for about 2 or 3 years until I joined this youth group, and the youth group leader was super creepy, and pretty pervy. And there was just an off feeling that I got as a teenage girl, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. So I stopped going. And I was very lucky that I didn't have the guilt. I think that a lot of people get associated with, oh, you have to go. I can't believe you won't, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's a lot of guilt when you, as a teenager, if you decide you don't want to do that. But then going to college, and then, especially a liberal arts college, I feel like we were actually really lucky because we got to learn a bunch of different kinds of things, I guess, and ways of thinking and viewpoints. And even, I mean, it's a liberal arts college, so I mean, I feel like we were allowed to think for ourselves a little bit more. And so I don't necessarily disagree with people who are religious. What I disagree with is when people try to force their belief system down your throat. So because I'm not religious, I don't go around and tell my friends who are religious, I can't believe you believe in God. I can't believe you go to church. It's so stupid. But what I find, and it's actually been a challenge as I've been an adult. We'll make friends with people, and there are two types of people. There are people who either they're brand new to the church and they're really determined to convert you. They're going to convert all the non-believers or
Yeah, I
whatever.
don't like proselytizing. That's
I
one.
can't stand it. And I have two sets of friends, actually. It's funny, they live directly across the street from each other in my neighborhood, like 5 houses down from me. But one set of them, like, they don't push religion on me at all. They're like, hey, I think you'd really enjoy this, but if you don't want to come, we'll meet up for brunch after, whatever it is, right? And then there's another one across the street. They started going to church again. And then every time we'd go to dinner with them or whatever, it was like, hey, we really want you to come. We really think you'd benefit, you'd really love it, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, listen, man, like, it's not our thing. Like, just leave it alone. Like, we don't pressure you or talk down to you or try to make you think differently. Why do you feel the need to do that for me? And then,
Right.
and sorry, in church, I have a rant.
No,
about
no, this is good
religion.
stuff.
But so growing up, so I did go to church. My sister married a preacher's son.
Hmm.
So religion was obviously part of her life, her adult life. And so we would go to church for Christmas, Thanksgiving, the big holidays or whatever for their service.
Mhm.
And then my niece was in the little church plays. And so we'd go do that. But what I didn't like is if you didn't put money into the little bowl thing, like they literally like so
Something happened with your audio just then. Did you like bump your phone?
no, my phone's dying though.
Did it go? It's like low battery or something.
Yeah, I have like 8%, so we'll probably have to wrap this up.
No worries. Let's wrap it up. Go ahead and finish what you were saying
But
though.
yeah, I mean what is it, the giving plate or the
Yeah,
whatever it
the
is,
offering.
the offering plate. Yeah. So when I was a kid after my dad died, and my mom and I would go to church, like you stopped being invited to things if you didn't put money into the plate. And to me, it's the church itself, like I believe in spiritual journeys and looking for a higher power, and maybe there being something bigger than us out there at play. I think it would be very ignorant to write that off, like to say that there's nothing else out there, whether it's whatever it is. I think that's ignorant, because how can I know, right? I don't know. I haven't been around, forever. But to say that it's this or this or this, or my way is right, or this religion is better than this one, to me, it's very arrogant and pompous, and very just a small-minded way of thinking, I guess, and you just haven't expanded your belief system, I guess. And not everyone agrees with me, which is fine. I mean, but I'm not going to go around and push I don't go around and push it on other people, because your beliefs are your beliefs. And, I believe that everyone's entitled to think their own thing. And I think that's what makes us a great country in that regards, is you are allowed to think for yourself. And if you're not, then that's just shitty. Like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I actually agreed with pretty much everything you said. I do consider myself not necessarily religious, but definitely spiritual. And I definitely believe, like, for me, the way I would describe it is like God, since God was the way I proposed the question to you. To me, like, God is nothing but a word that symbolizes something that's beyond words.
Yeah, that's a good way to think
Light,
about it.
I think light is a really good way. I mean, I said this on last night's podcast with David. It's like, it's really interesting how we don't have to, but because of the way that we communicate is with sound, we use.
Did you do your podcast with Dave from college?
No, David, no, different David.
Different David, okay.
Different David, but yeah, we have to use sounds to describe light.
Well, it's like Waking Life. You're the one that I think that actually showed me Waking Life. I still watch Waking Life. I still show people Waking Life.
It's a fucking incredible movie, dude.
But there's like, there's a script for that, right? Like, I'm sure you know exactly what scene I'm talking about, but it's like we say a word, and then it
goes through the air. The two ladies talking, and she's like, yeah, this vibrations traveling through the air, hits your eardrum. You hear the word love, then you have all of these experiences from your life. So when it hits your eardrum, you have a totally different understanding of, or conception of that word, whether it's love or any other God or any other word.
Right. Or whatever.
And that's exactly the point I'm making, Brittany. That's perfect. If anybody's seen Waking Life, that is exactly what I'm talking about, because to me, God is love, is energy, is nature, is consciousness, is, Yahweh, Krishna, like all of those are words to describe the same force that opens a flower, that allows you to think, that allows you to speak, that allows you to move, that brings the sun up, that spins the earth, but unless you're a flat earther. But any of it, what literally makes the world move, or life move, however you perceive that to me is reality. I think is actually almost a closer word to describe what I think of when I think of God. Reality itself is God. I think the worst part of Christianity or any religion is the externalization of God. God is in you and outside of you, but not just outside of you, and not just outside of everything that you see. It's not like,
but it's not something weird guy outside of this cloud making.
It's not outside of this realm. It's not outside of this dimension. It is this dimension and every other dimension.
It's time for you to die. Let's come up with a way for you to die today. Like, no, that's not it. That's not.
Yeah.
It's just not it. But
and the reason I have a soft spot for Christianity is because the history of Christianity is such that, at least from, I might be wrong, but from what I've read and what I've gleaned from my studies into early Christianity, it seems that it originated as a countercultural, very grassroots, and Gnosticism is really what the original Christianity is. And
wasn't it in response to Catholicism?
No, Catholicism developed that later, and that was kind of what ruined Christianity, in my opinion. Before it got
Because I did take a religious ethics class, but that was like 15 years ago. So
yeah, I think the downfall of Christianity is when Emperor Constantine made it the official religion of the Roman Empire.
yeah, that makes sense.
Because then it got politicized, and it became more political than
Well, I feel like
spiritual at that
anything
point.
that gets politicized
It's already lost its way,
goes to
right?
shit.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right. Well, I feel
Yeah,
like
this
we're
is
gonna need
awesome.
to wrap this up
Let's
because
wrap
I
it
got
up for sure.
100%.
This was awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. I couldn't have
Yeah.
asked for anything better or anything more.
Well, we'll do it again. Maybe
You're
when I
you're
have
not
a better
you
battery
ain't
charge.
listen, dude. Listen, you did fuck me over though, because I was trying to go to Denver on May the 1st for this show, and of course
I know.
I'm
I'm
not
so
gonna be
sorry. We'll be in
there on May
Mexico.
the 1st. The one time I'm ready, you've been asking me to come out there for like 5 years, 4 years,
I
whatever.
know.
I'm like, yo, I'm trying to come out there May 1st. Oh, I'm gonna be in Mexico that day.
Yeah, dude, that's actually the day I got married. So I will be on my anniversary trip.
Mayday, come on now.
I
Mayday.
know.
You
Well,
got
I got
married
married
on
on
Mayday
Mayday.
though? That's pretty epic.
Yeah, see.
All
I
right.
did it just so I didn't have to remember 2 anniversaries for when we met and when we got married.
Oh
It was a
shit. So
little,
y'all met on Mayday.
yeah, we met
And
on
I'm wearing my
Mayday and
Mayday
then
hat for the episode. Fucking
yeah,
perfect.
see, that's why we're friends. So
Well, Ryan is his name, right?
yeah, his name is Ryan.
Tell Ryan I
So
said what's up and
I will. Yeah, you'll
good
have to
luck
come
with
out.
you.
If you ever come out, I have 2 spare bedrooms. So you don't have to sleep in
You
this
said
one.
whenever, but I can't come out this May 1st though. See,
Well, I
that's
mean,
the
you
problem.
you just can't stay here.
Come on, man. Can't leave the key under the mat or something? Let G
Hey, dude, I got
crash.
keyless. I don't carry a key anymore because I lose them. So I got keyless entry. I got keyless garage
No,
door.
I'm not gonna pressure you. I'm
Whole
not gonna
9
put that
yards,
on you.
man. But all right, well, let's catch up another time. And it was great chatting.
Hell yeah. Thanks everybody for listening. Until next time. Peace.
All right, bye.